It's called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Makes a lot of sense because its original members all surrounded that part of the pond, more or less. The US, Canada, and 10 nations in Western Europe. NATO was founded in 1949 after World War II, when it became clear that there was a new threat to the European continent.
Russia had swallowed up 8 European countries without firing another shot.
To combat Soviet expansion in a badly weakened post-war Europe, the treaty sought to provide collective military and diplomatic support to its members.
To ensure this, they are sworn to stand together against aggression. An attack against one would be an attack against all.
NATO has 30 nations on board. Fun fact, the most recent addition to the lineup is North Macedonia, which joined just this year. But as the organization has grown, so have grumblings about what its purpose really is today. After all, the Soviet Union is no longer a thing. And NATO forces didn't take their first military action until 1994 in Bosnia. That's well after the Berlin Wall fell. There's also controversy over how NATO is financed. A few members, with the U.S. at the top of the list, have been spending a hell of a lot more on defense than the others. As you can imagine, that's created some tension. Okay, time for a pop quiz. In the past decade, who predicted a dim, if not dismal, future for NATO? Was it A, Donald Trump, B, Donald Rumsfeld, or C, Robert Gates? That's right, it was Robert Gates back in 2011 when he was serving as then President Obama's defense secretary. He was irritated by a lack of support from NATO in Afghanistan and dwindling contributions on defense from European nations. He offered this prediction.
Future U.S. political leaders, those for whom the Cold War was not the formative experience that it was for me, may not consider the return on America's investment in NATO worth the cost.
President Trump wasn't the first to say it, he just said it more colorfully.
So why should we leave them if we don't want to be the suckers anymore?
NATO nations have pledged to contribute more to the defense budget, but the real question is, what is the money for? What should NATO's priorities be today?
A vital factor of Allied air power is the long-range jet. An imposing array of these American planes back up the strength of NATO.
The threat landscape has changed dramatically since the Cold War. Cyber attacks are arguably a far bigger and more likely threat than conventional weapons. Climate change is an enemy too. Lack of water and forced migration caused by factors like extreme drought are creating geopolitical instability. And terrorist attacks are evidence that many of today's wars have no borders at all. As NATO tries to avoid the dismal future that Bob Gates predicted, it needs to more successfully confront all those new realities and define its role in how the world approaches China, a much bigger global economic power than Russia ever was. That happens to be nowhere near the North Atlantic, so maybe a rebrand too.